This is the Narendra Modi threat. So they're not, the three street papers are not naming Modi, but this is the Modi variant, Modi strain, threatening the overhyped and overflaunted end to the lockdown as promoted by Boris Johnson. And as flown by Boris Johnson. And the Times doesn't, for the second day, the Times is leading with the Indian Narendra Modi threat. But it's not, on this occasion today, Saturday, not mentioning India or Modi. And same is happening with the lying, Boris Johnson lying graph, is the Telegraph. Real risk of disruption. So they're not mentioning India, but that's where it is coming from. India, that is Narendra Modi's India. And the propaganda for the reopening of the kind of overhyped venues continues. And the lying Daily Mirror omits the word Modi and India. But the threat should be linked to the actual threat coming from Modi. And insane, lunatic, corrupt, in denial criminal, Daily Express is in denial, totally in denial of all of that. And is overhyping Rishi Sunak with that heading. And the Daily Star is running a piece about Ruskies, that is, it is referring to Russians, warning of impending World War III by twisting 4-year-old story from the Daily Star. So that's what it's saying. And if there is any room for any intellect, it is saying that thought for the day, number one for Anglo-Russo relations, obviously. And it is, the Daily Star is stupid in promoting Jeff Bezos, saying that Amazon is creating 10,000 new jobs. And on pages 4 and 5, this stupid Daily Star is promoting Johnson, who it is reporting has orders in the troops. And then there are the two main headlines, headings. June 21st, now under threat, new Indian variant fears. So they're reluctantly referring to India. And the scar is promoting the so-called peers interviewing Starmer. And there is complete childish and stupid, idiotic pieces in the rest of this car. And the Guardian is shielding Narendra Modi by not mentioning Modi or India in the heading, which is about India and Modi. And there is the second item on the front page of the Guardian. Face of conflict, civilians flee Gaza as violence escalates. Now that is a completely anti-Palestinian line that the lying Guardian, anti-Muslim Guardian, is running there. And on page 4 of the Guardian, it talks about Gaza being assaulted from air, sea, and land, but it doesn't say who is assaulting Gaza. It is shielding the attacker's name. And again, the Guardian is shielding Narendra Modi's name and India, the source. On pages 8 and 9, the capitulating, corrupt Guardian is referring to Johnson as PM and is completely omitting to mention omitting the word India or Narendra Modi. And so this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast only on the internet from London, within quotes UK, only on the internet, not on the terrestrial and nor on the satellite, nor on cable. This is only on the internet, and this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel. Part A of this date, today, Saturday, the 15th of May 2021. We're looking at the general kind of beginning of the papers, Fleet Street papers. Fleet Street papers, we diagnose world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. And we say that repeatedly because it is world exclusive diagnosis. Because the Fleet Street papers are the wrongly targeted, well, wrongly elevated and wrongly collectively promoted, quote, national, so-called national newspapers. The Fleet Street papers are not national because the nation does not exist. The only nation that the Fleet Street papers are representative of is Little England. And Little England is not. Little England is not the model that the people of Glasgow followed 2 days ago when they successfully halted the removal by the racists in the Home Office of 2 men. And that is the confession by the Guardian on page 22. The Guardian should have done that on the really page 2, perhaps. So it runs this 1-page piece. A special day, how Glaswegians rose up against Pearse detention and won. Now it says, is a piece by Libby Brooks, described as Scotland correspondent. It was just after 9 a.m. on Thursday when the call-out came. And it's a street in Glasgow called Kenmure Street. Kenmure Street's van man, who went on to spend nearly 8 hours under an immigration enforcement van to prevent the detention of 2 men on Glasgow's south side, was on his bike in minutes. It's not often you can catch raids in the act like this. But south side has a lot of folks pulling together, he explained. The only way that day could have ended was with our neighbor's release. There were simply too many local people standing in the street for the police to have taken the van away. The strategy does work, and we want the world to understand that it was the people on the streets who won. So after a standoff between police and a crowd that had swelled to hundreds, including families celebrating Eid, the 2 Indian nationals were released back into their community just after 5 p.m. The Home Office said the operation was in relation to suspended immigration offences. Sorry, reading this again. The Home Office said the operation was in relation to suspected immigration offences, and that advisors were working with the man to clarify the concerns. Van man, who prefers to remain anonymous, is a member of Glasgow's No Eviction Network, formed in 2018 after a lock change policy carried out by the Home Office housing provider, Sarco. Glasgow is the only dispersed city for asylum seekers in Scotland. Reading again. Glasgow is the only dispersal city for asylum seekers in Scotland. My job was probably the least interesting of anyone's, he said. It was really cold and I only had a t-shirt, so neighbors brought out blankets and hot water bottles to stuff around me. The speed of mobilization is a testament to the local networks that connect this richly diverse part of the city. and not everyone who answered the call was a protest veteran. Translator Declan Blech, 31, was working when a neighbor messaged to say he had seen two men being bundled into an immigration van outside. I put my shoes on and sprinted out. I just thought, you're not going to do that. Reading again. You are not going to do that in front of me. There is due process, and this is not it. He sat behind the van to stop it reversing. Van man was already underneath. I have never done anything like that before, so I was quite nervous. But every time I turned round, there were more and more people. It was a really special day, said Sophie, another member of the network. With so many wee acts of kindness, we set up a tuck shop at the bus shelter with bottles of water and food. Someone had brought their Eid cake to share. Residents and local cafes were letting people use their toilets. But Benman added, we can't ignore that things were on a knife edge. Police Scotland brought in reinforcements, and when that didn't work, they brought in horses, and when that didn't work, they brought in riot gear. It just goes to show how these hostile environment policies start off criminalizing migrants, but quickly turn on anyone else who stands in the government's way. Amir Anwar, a lawyer, said, I couldn't believe the Home Office had done this on one of the holiest days in the Muslim calendar. The heavy police presence was inflammatory and provocative. But Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister and MSP for the constituency, said the police had been in an invidious position. And a police spokesperson said that while they did not assist in the removal of asylum seekers, they did have a duty to protect public safety. Anwar had planned to celebrate Eid with his children, but from 10 a.m. his phone didn't stop ringing. 7 hours later, he was speaking to the man in a windowless cubicle in the van, explaining events in Punjabi. I said to them, you are free because of the people of Glasgow. They had tears. They had tears in their eyes. Now, this one must be one of the rarest public mobilization anywhere in the world where so-called migrants are being bundled into vans for removal. And we shall be having a lot to say about this and the underlying issues. On the other side of the paper, well, other side of the page, that is a piece which is headed Fraud Office launches inquiry into Gupta Farms, including finance links to Greensill. Now, we've said that. We've said that Sanjeev Gupta is connected with David Cameron's corrupt Greensill criminality. And it is bound to have a lot more in the contents as the time goes on. Now, the Murdoch scum is really probably the only one that is actually naming India. well, it should be Modi, but India as the contextual intro to the squeaky bug time heading. Indian COVID variant fears. And the Financial Times doesn't seem to have the how to spend it supplement this time. Either they haven't produced it or they mislaid it or forgot to include it. We shall look at the rest of the financial crimes, and it is boasting about homes. And when we say financial crimes, we do mean and we intend to mean and refer to the total policy of being in denial about the reality of society. So when they do the supplements like the home, what is it called? Houses and home. They really do that by denying any rights and the poverty that is created by crooks that are looting and robbing the country's resources. And the front page of the Financial Crime says, serious fraud office probes, that is investigates Sanjeev Gupta metals empire. Fraud office in talks with whistleblowers, and revelation sparks collapse of rescue finance. And the third prominent item on the front page is about the Israeli attacks on the Palestinians. But it doesn't refer to Israel in the heading. And the second prominent item is about COVID variant puts June reopening for England at risk, Johnson warns, but it doesn't say Indian or Narendra Modi. And it doesn't refer to Modi or India in the first paragraph either. It's only in the second paragraph that the Financial Crimes even acknowledges that this is a threat caused by Narendra Modi and the Indian tsunami. And the Financial Crimes is again leaving out the reference to Narendra Modi. In the details, virus variants, new strains, heightened fears of carbs breathing. Now there is a letter in the Financial Times crying. That's the only item today that has the name Modi in any heading. And the heading is in a totally misleading, corrupt, contradictory statement. Modi's COVID stance is hampered by colonial-era bureaucracy. In his critique, The Unmaking of India, in his critique, The Unmaking of India, Life and Arts, FT Weekend, May the 1st, of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's handling of the second wave of the pandemic in India. Ramachandra Guha sacrifices objectivity in favor of drama. So this is a defense of Modi, not from India, from somebody who has got the address at the KREA University in Singapore, Ananta Nageshwaran. And this is a lying letter, and the reference to colonial era bureaucracy is a completely dishonest reference. But we shall be talking more about all of that later. So this is the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast online on the internet from London in the UK within quotation marks. This is part A of the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. That is, of course, done in the active context of the British government corruption and criminality, racism and discrimination and disparity between the many and the few. And Fleet Street is stuffed full of propaganda diversions, shoring up the few and ignoring the many, including performing the role of lying about the violence and the massacre of the violence on and the massacre of the Palestinians. And there is, of course, no mention of the other places and locations where millions of people are being victimized, violated, murdered, massacred, and being treated to genocide policies. Most of those people in Asia are Muslims. And we shall be looking at all of those things. Now, back to the question of the Eid al-Fitr, that is still being observed in parts of the world and in parts of the communities. Eid al-Fitr is the first Eid of two Eids that are observed by Muslims every year. This one, Eid al-Fitr, is observed at the end of the holy month of Ramadan. And as I said yesterday, there is no real Islamic infrastructure anywhere in the world, anywhere in the countries that are numerically Muslim majority, to help to help the poorest people. To help the Muslim poorest among the Muslims and help the other people who are not necessarily Muslims but poor and in poverty. And the reason why I said that is because the Muslims, preachers, many of the Muslim kind of propagandists claim that Islam is the best solution. Islam is the best way of life and so on. So this is the kind of calendar year, the Muslim calendar, 1442, which is nearly 1,500 years, so just short of 60 or plus years. So if Islam is the best way of life, then how is it that Muslims are, first of all, socially and societally kind of disjointed and have been disjointed, not united in terms of the narrative of providing compassion and what currently is called universal values that eradicate and address poverty and hunger and destitution. There has never been really a Muslim originated and Muslim provided, Muslim kind of delivered program that addresses even 5% of the Muslim population, let alone all of the Muslim population that is in poverty and hunger and destitution, homelessness, displacement, disenfranchisement. And the existence of the United Nations organization is not serving as an effective substitute for what should happen and should have been in existence by the Muslims, provided by the Muslims. So where does it come from? Do individual Muslims, including those propagandists and kind of recruiters, because there is a significant and disturbing missionary kind of zeal among too many Muslim kind of activists in the Western Hemisphere who want to recruit non-Muslims. And it is not a pleasant sight because it is aggressive and it is done in denial of the inadequacies and the corruption that dominate the Muslim communities in those countries, including in Britain. And there is no accountability, there is no audit of this deficient behavior and activities and in denial behavior. There is no Muslim solidarity. I mean, it is a phrase that can be used, but there is no Muslim solidarity. Now, there are many reasons for this inadequacy and lack and gap. One of the most kind of dominant reasons is, of course, the ongoing operation of anti-Muslim agendas by the various forces that are either in power across the West, across the world, or who are in collusion with one another based on the agenda and narrative to oppose and to deny and to violate and to attack and to oppress Muslims Going back to the same issue of Islam being the best way of life in the world, Muslims do not have any excuse to not have the infrastructure, not have the programs that I have been referring to, that there should have been. Those Muslims who are in power, in positions of power, making decisions that are allocated, that include decisions that include the allocation of hundreds of billions of pounds every year, altogether trillions of pounds or trillions of dollars equivalents are being affected by the decisions of these, quote, Muslims. These Muslims don't make the decisions by showing any recognition that can be accessed in their contents of their behavior, decision-making behavior. There is no recognition of the existence of the serious poverty and hunger, destitution that hundreds of millions of Muslims are in. So if those decision makers are not even bothering to recognize the Muslims in hunger and poverty and destitution and displacement, then they cannot be, the decision makers, expected to think of non-Muslims who are in states of destitution, hunger, poverty, displacement. These are serious defects, the liability and responsibility for which the decision makers, the ones in power, must be blamed and held accountable. Those who are not in power, those who cannot have power, cannot be blamed. So that is a general statement and finding and commentary in the context on the occasion of the Eid al-Fitr. Somebody, or a number of people who have tweeted or posted comments about what happened on Thursday in Glasgow South Side. And we talked earlier about this, where the local people mobilized to stop a van, immigration van, removing 2 Indian persons for being illegal migrants in the UK. So somebody that we have noticed has posted, tweeted words to the effect that these people were not even Muslims, or at least one of them was not even a Muslim. It was a Sikh person. Sikh meaning S-I-K-H, not S-I-C-K. So therefore, to call it, to describe the immigration officials from the Home Office as violating the spirit of Eid or the atmosphere of Eid, this person said, was wrong. Well, this person is a completely anti-Muslim, and this person suffers from anti-Muslim kind of extremely anti-Muslim hatred and ignorance and intolerance and spite. Because the Eid in Muslim communities, in Muslim majority communities, is the biggest event of the year in the Muslim calendar. So it carries this international message, and it is reflected in the idea of the Eid being observed even in an area like the south side of Glasgow. even if the Muslims are not in significant numbers, but they are in significantly euphoric mood. That is what happens. If another faith group observes Christmas or something similar, then the euphoria occurs. And any attack on the human rights of a person in the vicinity of that area is treated as a violation and an attack and a denial of that euphoric, festive spirit, which is what the people who refer to the outrage on the day of Eid were thinking of. So whoever objected to that is essentially vexed that the Eid was even treated as a positive event. Such is their hostility of and ignorance of Muslims and the festival of Eid. Going back to the original statement that Islam is preached as the best way of life by many Muslim propagandists and preachers. And this is the occasion, the Eid, as was being referred to by people of Glasgow South in the mobilization against immigration raid on Thursday. This was a small but accurate example of Eid being a force for the good, because the spirit of Eid was expanded to cover those people who are not theologically, personally Muslims, but were extended the benefit of feeling the protection of the message that Eid should be about respecting, recognizing, and helping and solidarizing with other people, everyone. So there is a kind of backhanded recognition by an English paper of the existence of Cornwall. Remember, we have said repeatedly that Cornwall, while Wales is recognized just about, Cornwall is not even recognized by the English-centric Little English commentary and narrative. So here is the Financial Crimes backhandedly saying Cornwall in a corner. Everyone wants a piece of it. So it is on pages 8 and 9. House and home. Sun, surf, and flat whites. That is supposed to be UK property. Cornwall's frenzied housing market is increasing tensions as outsiders and investors make it unaffordable for locals, writes Liz Rollinson. And this is only possible for any outsiders to do that, make the house buying unaffordable for locals, if housing is treated as a commodity, as a business, as a profit creating, profit generating exercise rather than a right. Think about that. Property investor James Tomlinson from Greenwich, southeast London, has just bought his fifth buy-to-let property in Cornwall. He's purchased a one-bedroom flat at the Lina, a new ship-shaped development on the beach in the seaside town of Falmouth, where prices for the cheapest homes start at £325,000. Since investing in his first Cornish apartment in 2013, Tomlinson believes he cannot go wrong with prime beachfront locations. I started doing this way before the current staycation boom, and I have never had a bad year. Since the start of the pandemic, demand for homes in Cornwall has increased sharply. The average property price in the county has risen 9% in the past year to £328,720 according to land registry data analyzed by estate agents Hamptons. Homes have been flying off these shelves. During the first 3 months of this year, 8 out of every 10 homes put up for sale in North Newquay sold subject to contract, according to Rightmove, making it the fastest moving market in the country. Well, they are confusing the word country. They're not referring to country, they're not referring to Cornwall by country. They're referring to the UK or England. In the popular towns of Penzance and St. Agnes, homes are selling in an average of 5 and 3 days respectively, according to Hampton. And so far this year, 44% of their buyers have come from outside Cornwall, the highest level since at least 2012. Frenzied sales and rising prices have added to local tensions, however, as residents of Cornwall, home to some of the most deprived areas in the UK, struggle to afford homes in their own communities. Now that's it. That is what is happening. When deprived areas are being targeted for trading in homes and houses, the deprived get even more deprived and disenfranchised. And that is only possible if the access to housing is not treated as a human right, which is how it should be, not just in Britain, in the UK, but in the rest of the world. Imagine what would happen if housing became a human right. As well as demand coming from holiday-let landlords and second home buyers, the number of buyers choosing to relocate to Cornwall has also escalated, says Chris Clifford of Sabins. In 2019, 30% of our buyers were looking to relocate to Cornwall, but it was 45% in 2020. Estate agent Jonathan Cunliffe says that areas within a 40-minute drive of Truro have become popular with relocating families because of the two main independent schools there. For the next academic year, the Truro School has received the highest number of applications in 10 years, with the cohort from London and the Southeast having doubled since 2019 to 13%. The pandemic prompted many families to rethink their priorities, and parents want to get out of the city for a better quality of life, says Sarah Matthews, head of Truro High School for Girls, where applications for places have increased by 25%. We are 10 minutes from the beach where the girls learn surfing and stand-up paddleboarding. According to local estate agent Josephine Ashby, the influx of out-of-county buyers has been stirring up a lot of emotions among local residents. The fact that many of the people flocking here are also wanting to move here full time rather than just come for the summer does not make it any easier because they are still putting pressure on pricing, she says. Local authorities have been trying to improve housing affordability by banning the sale of newly built properties to second home buyers or investors after St. Ives introduced the policy 5 years ago. Other popular seaside towns have followed suit, including Rock and Polzee. In referendum in February last year, 90% of the residents of Fowey on the south coast voted in favor of a similar ban. In St. Ives, the restrictions have yet to dampen price inflation. The average property price in the area has increased 9.5% in the past year to £441,730 average. Our waitresses can't even afford to buy a studio flat, so have to carry on living with their parents, says Paula Richards of the vegan restaurant, the Bean Inn in, in Carbis Bay, a suburb of St. Ives. Its blue flag beach was little more than derelict beach huts and a cheap shop before the decade-long revamp of the Carbis Bay Hotel and Estate that will host the forthcoming G7 conference next month. Since the makeover, we have had Russians and Rolls Royces around here. Buyers will now pay $750,000 plus for a bungalow with a sea view in Carbis Bay, says Duncan Lee of Humbards, an estate agency that has been selling plots of land at Treloehan Manor on a headland between St. Ives and Carbis Bay to mainly out-of-country buyers. The G7 has caused real emotion in the town about the removal of protected woodland for hotel facilities, says a buyer from Surrey, who prefers not to reveal his name and who paid £1 million for a contemporary style new house. And it goes on. There is no reference in that piece to the UK central government or to any real county council that controls the area, introducing any policy remotely resembling the recognition of housing as a right. And the fact that even working people like the waitresses in the hotel have to continue to live with their parents clearly demonstrates that there is building and accumulating multiple related discrimination and disadvantage for the local people in the area, violating almost all the human rights relating to housing, employment, freedom, and their neighborhood that are enshrined in the various treaties that the UK remains a signatory to. So what we shall be doing is continuing a in-depth look at the papers, Fleet Street papers, and the implication of the invasion of the Narendra Modi strain of the COVID-19 variant that is jeopardizing safety of not only Britain but is also impacting on other countries in Western Europe and North America.